Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a place where interesting people come to talk about their creative outlets. As for myself, I'm an author, podcast host, travel enthusiast, and lover of the outdoors. If you'd like to learn more about my published works or adventures, go to my website, ericpbishop.com. I hope you enjoy the show, and please go out and support today's guest. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to another episode of A Tale of Two Scribes, and tonight I am super excited to have Steve Stratton on the program. Steve, welcome.
Eric, so glad to be back with you, man. This is awesome.
Been wanting to do this for a while. I think when your summer release came out last year, you were coming on the Spear. You were coming on with John, I think, around
Right.
that time, and so I did not want to try to double up with the audience and put you on mine as well. So I figured it'd be a perfect time with book number 3 coming out. Well, really four for the Shadow Tear series. So you
Yeah,
are the
excited for that. January 14th.
Yeah, so let's dive into first thing. Let's start. I have a lot of questions for you because you've lived such a oh really you've lived such a fascinating life, and you're not that's not past tense. You're living a fascinating life, but your stories that have got you up to this point to be an author. I write about a lot of stuff. You've lived a lot of the stuff I write about, which is really cool to me. So I can fanboy out when we talk about this kind of stuff. But let's go back a little further from that though. Is what wild hair got you into writing? What was the impetus for that?
Yeah, so after leaving the government, I went into defense contracting where I've always had a knack for telling stories and being a storyteller.
Hmm.
Some other language for that kind of stuff too, but we won't say it here. And um, I was pulled into like doing proposals to the government to win new
Hmm.
business at SAIC and teaming up with Lockheed or Raytheon, things like that.
Right.
And so I learned to write sort of in that sort of present tense, sort of strange way for proposals for the government. And then that morphed into doing what we would call product marketing. So, like for your PC or for your router, your firewall, things like that. So I had this writing background, usually sort of like I'm talked about, sparse writing, trying to get a bunch of stuff into a little package onto one sheet, a brochure, something, a slick,
Hmm.
those kind of things. Um, and in 1993, there was an event in Mexico, and my mother was killed in a car accident where they were rammed. My parents were rammed by drug runners from the Sinaloa cartel, and they were out of their mind. And the federales just put everybody into jail, and my mom
Hmm.
passed away in a Mexican prison. I mean, Mexican hospital.
Hmm.
I wanted to put the guys in prison. Actually, I wanted to go invade Mexico. What do you know? Sort of sounds like a Lance Bearwolf story, right?
Right.
So that was an impetus, and I had done like critical path. I had done Gantt charts. I had done PowerPoints. I had done storyboards like they do in Hollywood,
Hmm.
thinking about this story. And it was 2019, and with the government, Thanksgiving to the end of the year is pretty light, right? Everybody's going on vacation,
Hmm.
out of town. Um, and so my wife was just like, why don't you just write it? You're a good storyteller. Just write. Don't worry about that thing called English. Thank
Yeah,
goodness.
that
Yeah.
can be fixed.
Yeah, it could be, yeah, with a lot of work. So as I was doing that, I started to get excited. I'm looking at my favorite authors at the time, and uh, I was like, I want to jump in, right? I want to learn. I
Hmm.
need a quick start. I need some help. Turns out Jerry Jenkins, who wrote the Left Behind Christian series, is an hour away down in the Black Forest between where I live in Aurora, Colorado, and the Springs, Colorado Springs.
Hmm.
And I was able to get a 6-month mentorship with him. And I was so happy when he'd only like edit 20% of my words. It was a bad day if it was 30, 35%. He's like, Steve, we're writing a book, not a screenplay. You can't hophead like this. It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, can't keep track. But that's how I got engaged. And after that, I was hooked because it was just, I've always, like I say, been a storyteller. I've
Hmm.
always, you know, I started off like a lot of people in like sci-fi, and then start getting into the spy novels, and of
Hmm.
course James Bond, and but then Taylor, Tinker, Soldier, Spy, all just that kind of genre,
Yeah.
and never even thought about writing because I was doing it at work. Why would I want to take more time to write that kind of
Right.
thing?
Exactly.
And but that just turned out to be the perfect time to just start wailing on the keyboard and trying to put some semblance of a story together. And then with Jerry's help and a lot of other people, because I love to make community, I love to make my own tribe,
Hmm.
like you and Jeff Wilson early on, people who were very helpful
Yeah.
to me, and give me guidance and other things like that. Um, and it took off from there, and I still love it. That's why I've got so many irons in the fire, and it's
Hmm.
like it. I have retired a couple years ago, but my wife says she wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
Well, you end up, especially with which we'll dive in a little bit here, some of the experience that got you to that point. But I think with these lives, and it's multiple in a way, because of the different careers you've done and everything, these lives that you've lived, you're able to kind of take those experiences and maybe some of it's not fiction, but put a fictional spin on, on kind of what you've lived your life, and which is exciting. It almost breathes a second life into some of the experiences you've had just in the course of your career.
yeah, I've got to be careful not to turn a book into a tactical document or a training manual. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. Plus, I love doing research. I'm a nerd. I love new technology. What the heck is DARPA up to lately?
Hmm.
Or most people don't know that there's an intelligence community version of DARPA called IARPA. It's
Hmm.
intelligence, advanced research projects, things like that. So
Hmm.
lots of fun. Some of it you can't talk about, but you can fictionalize a whole bunch of it and get what you need. So.
Well, you can know one thing with whatever DARPA's working on, we'll know in about 10 or 15 years.
Right. It's all yeah, DARPA's usually bleeding edge stuff that
Yeah.
not coming to fruition right away, unless it's something like Stingray that imitates a cell tower and lets you find all the bad guys' cell phones. But
Hmm.
that there are some things that get pushed to the forefront and happen quicker. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So let's go even further back and let's talk about your career. So you get out of school. When did you join the military? How old were you when you went in?
I was 19.
19.
Uh,
Okay, so fresh out of school,
well, it's pretty fresh. Yeah,
pretty fresh.
December of 73. So
Okay.
I messed around for a little while, worked in lumber mills and other things up in Northern California, and then joined the military really to see the world and then
Did you
get
have
some money
family that
for
served
college.
before, that kind of followed their path, or no?
Yeah, my
Okay.
all my family, all the way
Okay.
back into the 1400s in England. I'm half Viking, I'm half English, and everybody's a sailor. Everybody's in the Navy or the Merchant Marines or both. And I joined the Army and baba black sheep. That was, yeah, but I mean, I'm great in a canoe. I'm terrible on a surfboard. So I'm a dirt guy. I love the dirt. I love the
There's
woods.
always one in a family that has to break away and do it their own way. So,
Exactly, exactly. So I was 19 in 1973, and I was going to go up to Fort Lewis. So go up from Northern California,
hmm.
just straight up the coastline to Fort Lewis, be in the Pacific Northwest, be at the Ranger Regiment or the Ranger Battalion there.
Hmm.
And at least that was my plan. It's where my contract said. And these guys showed up in Monterey at Fort Ord, where I was at basic training, in longer hair, not shoulder length, but longer hair
Hmm.
and suits, and started talking about traveling the world and things like that. And they were looking for volunteers, and I kept raising my hand, raising my hand. I was good enough salesman to get myself in,
Hmm.
and then eventually found out it wasn't until August of '74 before I was I mean, I'd finally gotten orders that said, come to Washington, D.C. I'm like, wow, okay.
Wow.
I'm not going to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. I'm going to be doing something different.
Hmm.
And because they'd put me through electronics training. So,
Okay. And
yeah.
then that's what so it was that first assignment when they did that was with the White House?
Yes, it's
Wow.
called White House Communications Agency. So,
Okay.
back in my day, we set up radio systems around Washington, D.C., uh, radio systems, phone systems, like I say, with
Hmm.
corded phones and 6-button phones and things like that. And we set it up so the people that work for the president and the Secret Service could communicate and coordinate his movements, the vice
Hmm.
president. We even did some Kissinger during my day before state got the funding and the people to do it themselves. So it
Yeah.
was uh it was a full-time job, but a lot of fun.
I would be curious if obviously you're retired now and you're doing civilian work and also writing a lot of your time. I'd be curious if you could go back into a similar role now and just the way technology's changed to be able to see how you like whatever you're able to say because I know it's changed so dramatically like what was really because everyone now is nowadays if they put it on Netflix or they're putting on any kind of shows everything's cutting edge and cell phones and satellite phones and biometric readers and all that back in 1974 if that was there they kept it with the aliens out out hidden so what was it really like then and how much has it changed.
So the first satellite system I worked on took 4 of us to carry. Literally, the antennas, huge box. It was a Navy system, supposed to be used on a ship. We
Okay.
used to carry it around because we had to go portable. Everything would go on the back of a C-141,
Hmm.
sometimes a C-5A. We would load it up and go off with the Secret Service a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks in advance.
Okay.
They'd be doing the security work, like
Hmm.
John, and doing the advanced work on the security side. We'd be setting up radio systems for their walkie-talkies, phone
Gotcha.
systems for the president, and if they're staying overnight or not. Does the staff need phone systems?
Hmm.
The that that satellite system operated at 9.6, so dial-up kind of speed. But it was one of the first satellite systems,
Yeah.
and we carried our own switchboards, like I was mentioning before we started,
Hmm.
um, anywhere from 6 to 20 positions. I mean, a big, huge thing that would take like 8 of us to move around, kind of thing.
Right.
Switchboards, these radio systems, and so it was compared to today, where everything's digital, right? And
Hmm.
everything that I carried, except for paper fax capability, is in your iPhone, right,
Yeah.
or on your Android phone,
Yes.
right? So the digitization of the information technology space, right? Just as I was leaving to go to the Secret Service, we got our first digital switch, and it was this black box, and I had a little line, a little neon line to program through like that. I
Hmm.
remember that, and it only did like a dozen phone lines, things
Okay.
like that. But it was digital, and that
Yeah.
was a big deal. So yeah, I was very analog back in the day. Our
Hmm.
backup to the backup to the backup for the president was a high frequency radio system, once again, something we'd ripped out of ships, this big tall tower of equipment. We'd have 2 of them, and we'd take over not take over, but we'd hide out in the back of a fire station
Hmm.
and set up these long range antennas so that we could talk back into the Pentagon and stuff. So very, very analog back in the day. Heavy, big, bulky equipment. So crazy.
Yeah. Again, if we could get you in to see how, uh, well, it's grown too. Not just the technology is the scope of like the net of how big out the Secret Service reaches now, is
Well, in my
just
day,
dramatic.
I would be when I switched over to the Secret Service after 4.5 years on active duty, I I was in technical security, so I would bring in the electronic countermeasures team with sweep for bugs.
Hmm.
We didn't have a cyber team, we didn't have computers,
Yeah.
right? there were mainframes, but there weren't personal computers.
Right.
And right, so we didn't have to worry about cyber intrusions
Hmm.
and defeating those kind of things. Um, the we were looking for analog devices with the bomb dogs and the EOD teams, so packages, even in my day, they were just starting to use little circuits to program timers for explosive devices.
Hmm.
But that was just starting, and
Yeah.
things like that. So yeah, it's way different. Luckily, I stayed in technology, but I went
Hmm.
to the security side,
Yeah.
and so cybersecurity. So I still understand the technology and can imagine it and how little it's got and how nice it is to travel. Like with one suitcase that has like, half a U-Haul truck's worth of gear in my day,
Hmm.
inside a suitcase. So pretty cool.
So when you switched over to the Secret Service, you were no longer active duty. Were you then doing communications for Secret Service and interacting with other soldiers that were still on the communication agency side?
No, Secret Service had a comms group,
Okay.
which a bunch of my friends went to, but I was called technical security specialist. And back then it's called mission support now, but it was called
Okay.
TSD, Tech Security Division.
Gotcha.
And so I was in the alarms and video division. So I took care of alarm systems and video systems around the White House, vice presidents, any of the campaign people, like when
So
Reagan.
you've got all the video goods, don't you?
Very, very grainy old bad video, black and white video. Like I put in the first alarm system in Vice President Bush Sr.'s house in Houston,
Oh wow.
um, things like that. So and these systems were not digital; they were current loop.
Yeah.
We send power down to the little magnet, and if the line's closed or not, some
Hmm.
intrusion. Some very basic things. We were getting some very cool technology out of DOE at the time, but still basic compared to today.
Hmm.
So I was doing those things. I wasn't in communication anymore. I knew those guys. The Secret Service communicators, they would work with the agents who protected like the Prince of Saudi Arabia or
Okay.
the well, the Queen of England, the Five Eyes partners, the Queen of England, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they
Mhm.
got sort of the better, along with the Pope, they got the bigger team.
The Pope,
Um,
of
yeah.
course.
Oh yeah, working John Paul, and a Pope Mobile and going down Pennsylvania Avenue. That was a treat. But yeah, that technology shift really, really interesting. And then I was shifted away from, like you say, communications into physical security,
Hmm.
uh, chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction, IEDs. I trained some classified, was trained in some classified places by people who trained people for the agency and other things like that. So
Hmm.
I could say that now. But yeah, it was a very exciting, fun time. But my last year at the Secret Service was a campaign year, and John will tell you, uh, Chris Albanese can tell you, his
Hmm.
wife was just on the campaign trail. She's still in the Secret Service. What a
Yeah.
grind that is. I ended
Hmm.
up with like clothes in 7 different cities at dry cleaners, and I got to the point where I couldn't make any more money. I used up all the unscheduled overtime, the scheduled
Right.
overtime. They're paying, of course, for my flight and my hotel and my food, but I just can't make any more money. I'm working, working,
Yeah.
working. So,
Which that's as even as a taxpayer well, China's probably paying those bills, but as a taxpayer that should be paying those bills, hey, if we're asking someone to do that duty, they shouldn't be doing it, out of the kindness of their heart because they've maxed out. Pay them. Pay them or bring
we,
on more people, which is not easy. It's much easier said than done. I get that,
yeah, yeah.
people,
I'm not
but
sure what the rules are nowadays, but hopefully it's better. But
so your
yeah.
your time spanned with starting with Carter up until to
So I
Bush.
got to I got to DC 2 weeks before Nixon resigned.
I
My
told you. So
sponsor,
you got the video for water. You got the video. I tell you.
we're driving in and he says, do you know what that is? And I said, that's not the Watergate, is it? He's like, yeah, don't go there.
Oh, go there.
Don't have lunch at that Hojo's across the street. It's off limits.
That's funny.
But yeah, so most of my time was with, I mean, and I learned how to ski in Vail, Colorado with President Ford because
Hmm.
the colonel says, "Hey, we need somebody to ski with behind the president with the backup radio, an old military radio on my back on your back." And I'm
Yeah.
like, I just raised my hand because I'm that kind of crazy. Took one lesson and then I'm skiing behind the president. Luckily, it was on blue slopes, not black. There was a time when I had to bug out, had to exit stage left not to hit the president after he slid down, slid out. So, yeah, it's pretty funny.
I'm pretty sure I've told you the story. I'm sure I've said it in the podcast once. Is I met Ford's the only president I've met in person, and I was senior year of high school. Went to Palm Springs. Was at the Bob Hope Invitational.
Yeah, there you go. He loved that.
Oh yeah, he was there. So was there with my grandmother went out there every winter for a couple months, and so she told me my senior year, hey, if you fly yourself out, you pay for your flight out, I'll cover the rest of the week. So I've always had a job since I was 10 years old, so paying for a flight wasn't a big deal. Got a flight, get there, and so she was like, "You want to go see Bob Hope Invitational?" Absolutely. I was a big golfer. I played on my high school team, and so I forget which hole it was, but at that point we had linked up with my uncle Elmer who used to golf with President Reagan's optometrist or Nancy Reagan's optometrist, some connection. So he knew everybody. And so, and I'm talking to him and he's like, "Oh, Ford's up there. You want to meet him?" And I'm like, "Heck yes, I want to read. I want to meet a president." I was a history buff already at that point, a nerd. So we go up there. He's on the tee. He's got two Secret Service agents, not on him, but very close by. But my Uncle Elmer goes up, smacks him in the back in the shoulder. "Hey Jerry, how's it going?" And I'm like, I'm waiting for like the bullets to fly and my Elmer to be on the ground. Secret Service agents kind of look over and just kind of like, he's okay. We're fine. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. So I did get to
Nice.
shake his hand and say hi to him, but of course back then we didn't have these lovely technologies, so I have no photo of any of that stuff. I think I had a little wind-up camera at the time back in '96. It wasn't digital yet. But yeah, so it's fun. So your experience with him was a little bit cooler, especially since you almost, creamed him with skis.
Yeah, and that night, he decided he was going to come and say thank you to all the military folks and
Hmm.
and White House communications multi-service. So we have Marines, Navy, Air Force people, and our command center was in um, Billy, um, not Billy Joel, Billy Tom Laughlin's house.
Okay.
Right, he did the part Indian kung fu movie thing,
Hmm.
veteran movie, whatever. So that was our command post, and essentially across the circle was where the Ford stayed.
Okay.
And I made the president a hot toddy, and I got a picture with him. I got another picture out in Grand Junction because that was really the closest place that the presidential aircraft could land.
Hmm.
And I'm in my Jacques Penney suit, my fine suit. You know, I think I had, I don't know how many hundred of dollars for clothing allowance, and it got me like one suit with a reversible vest. Back in the day, I was very suave. And, yeah, Jacques Penney is my clothier. Anyway, but that's a cool one because I'm in my Ray-Bans and stuff, shaking hands with Jerry and stuff. He was very, very his whole family was nice. His sons, they were crazy. They like to ski the back bowls and just like if it's steep and dangerous, that's what they wanted to
That's what they
do.
want to do. Yeah.
And I was so new, I would just sort of stay at the top of the mountain and let some of the Secret Service guys who could ski like Jean-Claude Keely,
Hmm.
um, they would go with them. I'd stay on top of the mountain. Let me know if you need something. I'm
Yeah.
not going down there.
I've had a few friends that have done helicopter skiing and backcountry stuff, and I'm just like, avalanche. I mean, and I skied a lot growing up. 'Cause I lived out in Colorado, skied out there, loved it, and decent, not great skier, but not a beginner. Well, definitely a higher intermediary at the time. And I'm like, yeah, no, I love fresh powder, but I don't like the idea of looking back and going, that is a whole freaking mountain coming after me. No, no, thank you.
Yeah, there's this video circulating of this snowboarding guy. He starts an avalanche and then he decides to do a backflip in the middle of it and skis out of it. It's like, no, no. I've climbed Mount Rainier and took a
Mhm.
whole week course instead of just blitzing up and coming back down
Hmm.
because I wanted to learn about how do you cut into the snow and determine is it avalanche, is it loose, is it
Right.
got multi-layer, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, now I got the willies. Not doing
Yeah.
it.
Did some snowshoeing at out in Colorado. Trying to think when we lived out there.
Rabbit's ears up by
Several different times we did it actually.
yeah,
So
place
yeah,
called the Rabbit's Ears. Um, very good place for snowshoeing. And then if you've never been on a sled before, a snowmobile, great
hmm
place to go learn and or follow the leader, different things like that. And yeah, I mean, there's just so many great places. And
hmm
uh, our cabin is on the back side of the mountain, so I'm not on the Vail side of the mountains. I'm on
Okay.
the back side, on the other side of Leadville.
Okay.
But I'm only like 35, 40 minutes from Breckenridge and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
So
skied
it's all over.
Breckenridge a few times. Breckenridge was really nice. Yeah, just I need to get out there and ski. I've not once I came back east, I still not taking my kids skiing. Which every year I go, we'll go skiing, and then I look outside, I'm like, it's 65, so that means up in the mountains it's probably like 55 and 50, and they made snow last night, and it's crappy, and it's like, nah, no thanks.
Slushy, yeah.
Oh, I experienced some of that growing up in New England, although we used to have better snow, and we actually our youth group, especially growing up during the winter, it was pretty much every weekend we were skiing. Sometimes we'd be up Massachusetts, but a lot of times we'd either go up into Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and just with the elevation change and with the colder weather back then, there was no making snow. It was all legit. Connecticut would make snow, so we'd ski in Connecticut sometimes with man-made snow, and it was just, it was crappy. There was this one mountain like 20 minutes from our house. And I was not a great skier, so this isn't arrogance, whatever. I skied it backwards because I was just so bored. I wouldn't ski going forward. I just ski backwards because it was so like
So
crappy.
after learning how to ski in Vail, and this is back in the day of the 210 skis, there's no shorty fat lollipop skis that help you turn and stuff, right?
Right.
So I'm essentially got the skis out in front of me, sitting back and just lifting a knee and I'm
Hmm.
I'm sort of I'm not skiing at all like an instructor would tell you how to ski. I'm
Right.
not over the tip of the skis and none of that. I get back east to go to West Virginia to snowshoe and find out that you're supposed to sharpen the edges on the ski because I went helicoptering through a class. Luckily, I didn't hit anybody, and I'm just spinning around going, sorry, sorry. They're like, oh, okay, there goes another knucklehead.
Too funny.
Oh, yeah.
And we're filming this a little bit before Caribbean Harvest comes out, and but President Carter just passed away yesterday,
Yeah.
actually, for
Yeah.
when we're filming this. But I wanted to ask you, did you have interactions with him while you were in Secret Service, or you were there during that time, right?
I was there for his whole
This
term.
whole term. Okay.
Right. Say I left as Reagan was coming to office. Well,
Okay.
I went on vacation, then decided not to come back. But uh, the yeah, the Carters came into office, um, and it was interesting. On the one hand, he could be very nice to certain people, but the military people that supported him, like when the president would come down from the nose of Air Force One,
Hmm.
there'd be cops and other local dignitaries, and occasionally we'd sneak in some new private on the Waka team, or specialist, whatever it might be. So he'd get a handshake from the president.
Hmm.
And sometimes he would just be in a mood or something. He would go by them.
He'd bypass them.
He'd bypass them because we all had, and you've seen them before. I've got a few left over, but we all had lapel pins, and
Hmm.
they changed all the time for each mission. But we
Hmm.
had lapel pins, and he knew which ones were Secret Service and which ones were Waka, things like that.
Interesting.
And that sort of made me mad. His wife was very nice. He was different down in Georgia when
Hmm.
he was away from DC or not thinking, he needed to be the president, I guess, or in that mindset. Um, his wife was very nice. The Mondales were extremely nice. They were just like country folk, nice
Hmm.
people. Back in the radio days, once again, I had to do what's called a phone patch. So to go from the radio to the phone system, I was in the middle, and the vice president's talking to his son down at the Naval Observatory at the vice president's residence,
Okay.
and the president and Mondale would say blah 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 over, and then I'd switch it, and then his son could respond.
Okay.
it was simplex. He couldn't talk at the
Yeah.
same time kind of idea.
You had to listen to those conversations.
He's yelling at him because he got report that his son was tearing up the lawn with a dirt
Oh
bike
no.
and he's going to have a party and they're not better not be any of that marijuana at that party and blah blah blah, you know. It was
Oh my
like,
goodness.
yeah, don't make me look bad, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, so it's some fun stuff like that. It
Yeah. Yeah,
good times.
my mom had texted me yesterday and said, "Don't you have a letter from President Carter?" And so I replied back and I said, "I have a signed picture and I have like a." So I sent them, and I told you this when I did it. When the Body Man came out, I sent the current president, Biden, and all the ex-presidents a hard copy of the book, a challenge coin that was numbered for their presidency. Kind of just knowing very little chance any of them would ever get it, but it was just kind of my way of kind of giving thanks to The Office since I was fictionalizing a big part of my story, but it was very much about that world.
Right.
And I thought if I hear back from even one of them, it'd be cool. So I did get a really nice letter back from President George W. Bush. I actually got two letters, and I think I've said this on one of the podcasts. And the first letter was from President Bush, and I read it. It was personalized. It was really cool. It's still sitting in a folder I need to put in a frame.
Yeah.
Sent me a signed photo as well. So I mean, it's like every now and then I'll pull it out and be like, I need to frame this thing. It's sitting in a folder. Um, but the second letter I got was from his communications director. It said the president was glad to do this for you. You may not post this online. He does not endorse the Body Man book. Blah blah blah. You can't use this for promotional purposes. And I'm like, they clearly looked at my social media accounts. But I did get something back from Carter. So Carter, I got actually a signed picture, which was really cool. And then I did get a little thank you note, but it was one of those thank you notes that, probably a kindergartner would get if they sent them a little card. Actually, the kindergartner would probably get a personal note. I got the generic one that's very nice looking. They had nothing to do with that. So, it's in a
Right.
folder as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's I don't have any of the pictures up. I've got some of my White House Christmas cards
Mhm.
framed, and those are pretty cool.
Yeah.
One from Ford, one from Carter, um, of the five that I had. But yeah, it's when you're 19, you're in the army, number one. Your
Right.
hair's longer. You're in civilian clothes, maybe cheap ones, but you're in civilian clothes,
Hmm.
and you're in the Georgetown portion of DC at a location right across from one of the famous blues bars in
Hmm.
all of DC, and down the street from the Bayou where John Prine and all kinds of other people play. Life's really good.
Yeah.
Life's really good, you know, and you're essentially, um, yeah. And I used in 4.5 years of being in on active duty in the Army, I used one piece of Army equipment, and that was a microwave piece of gear from St. Simon's Island back to the mainland
Mhm.
when President Carter went down there. But yeah, so it was a good time for
Which,
sure.
so were you on Carter's detail during the election, or did they switch you to Reagan?
Yes,
You were on Carter. Okay.
yeah, and so I was in the Secret Service. I remember I was had just come out of doing a follow-up inspection of the elevators. And we would put what we call tamper tape on everything. So every doorknob, we could tell real easy
Mhm.
tape that's broken, give us an indication, things like that.
Sure.
And we had it everywhere around the hotel. And I walked up and then I realized I'm in the room with all the interpreters who are interpreting what's going on
Okay.
for other news outlets and,
Hmm.
BBC or whatever, but, XYZ Italian and French and Russian and everything else. And I saw the map going red and I was like, holy. And they were all looking at me like, shh, we're trying, we're on the air, we're on the air. Don't say that. And yeah, just watch that map turn in Reagan's favor. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was something like 400 and something to 48 or whatever the count there was it was not kind to Carter. So, but
No, just like it wasn't. I mean, a lot of the United States was mad at Ford for pardoning,
For
doing the
Nixon.
pardon for Nixon, you
Yeah.
know. But anyway, both good men in their own way, and yeah, it's amazing that he made it to 100 years, and he
Yeah.
was what, 98, 99, still out there hammering, beating away, and building
Yep.
houses and doing stuff. So good for him.
I have a friend who his family has a peanut farm down in Americus, Georgia, which is
You're
literally
kidding me.
no,
Really?
not no. So, first, I think it was the first time I've been down several times going hunting and stuff. And so I was there at one point and I was kind of like, because I had already met Ford. So I was like, it'd be really cool to meet Carter. Maybe I'll go over to the church because he's, teaches Sunday school and whatever. And I was there for a long weekend or whatever. And so I brought it up to my buddy. I'm kind of like, oh yeah, Carter's right around here and stuff. And he goes, yeah, we don't talk about Carter. I go, what? He goes, my dad and Carter has some issues. They know each other, I guess, when Carter was, local and was running for governor and all that time. So apparently there was some bad blood between my family and the Carter family. So he did take me down to Plains. Actually, I probably still have it up here with the shot glasses. I have a like a wooden chip, a peanut chip that's got Carter's face on it or whatever. I bought it at one of the little novelty store in Plains. I did go by his church, Maranatha Baptist, I think that's what it's called, but it wasn't on a Sunday, so he wasn't there, wasn't teaching. And I thought, one of those things where I said, yeah, maybe one day I'll come back and I'll go sitting into a Sunday school, and yeah,
Yeah,
never
yeah.
did. So
It's funny. It was the first time I'd never had grits before, and I mean, we got down there, there was nothing. So having
yeah,
you know, um, it's interesting because Nixon had full up second and third White Houses in like Homestead, Miami area, and then San Clemente,
right.
stuff like that. And they were fully operational. And Waka actually had teams of people that were there full time at
Hmm.
both of those places taking care of systems because Nixon was always at one of the two,
Yeah.
and um, yeah, so yeah, I remember I got this white sort of. I didn't even know what polenta was back then. So I didn't know what I was getting, this
You
this
didn't
white
know.
cornmeal stuff with eggs and stuff. And it's
Hmm.
like, man, where's the butter? I need more butter.
Where's the butter? Butter and salt. Butter and salt normally help with grits for sure. So some people
Yeah.
put hot sauce in them, all kinds of stuff.
Oh
Or
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's pretty funny. It was way rural compared to the other places that, Ford's house. We never used Ford's house. It's weird. Ford never stayed in his own house in Vail
hmm.
while he was president
Hmm.
because we couldn't protect him as well as where
Security
we were
risk,
at.
yeah.
Yeah. That kind of consideration. And he was very amenable about that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
You know, after the man who used to ski with him, the lead agent, Larry Boondorf, was also the one that saved him from Squeaky Fromme in Sacramento. He's the one that grabbed the gun.
Oh
Luckily, there
wow.
wasn't a round in the 45, but he grabbed the gun, and put the web of his hand,
Into
he
the
put that between the hammer and the pin of the 45. But this guy, he could ski veil black backwards. He was
hmm.
crazy good.
He was that good, yeah.
He ended up becoming the head of security for like the Winter Olympics
Okay.
group out of like Colorado Springs. I'm not sure. I think he's retired now, but he was a bit of a legend, of course, after
Hmm.
that event in Sacramento. So
Yeah, well, I mean, you had that event. You have obviously Reagan shooting, which was it 81? I don't remember.
yeah, I
It
had
was
just
80.
left,
You had just left. Okay.
and
Um,
I don't want to sound. I don't know what I don't want to sound like, but one of the primary tenets of security is you don't do the same thing over and over and over and over again.
mhm.
And in these short stories Um, I've written recently 4 short stories that have to do with an order called the Order of the Red Coral.
Hmm.
Red coral was a medieval token. People would wear red coral to ward off assassins.
Hmm.
So, sort of the basis of the book, but it's really very Secret Service like. But Dallas, 1963, was the 12th time Kennedy was going into an event and doing exactly the same thing.
Hmm. Yeah,
Getting off at the airport, motorcading around through the
right.
middle of town, have an event, and let a bunch of people see him, go to an event, and then sprint away, at the backside, things like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that irritated the heck out of me. I knew the people who got shot. I knew the agent with the Uzi in the air. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, that door at that hotel was the place.
Well, so then let's fast forward because I'm curious just to pick your brain again. We're not getting political with this stuff, but after Reagan, I mean, we had not that there was no threats. There's tons of threats, and the Secret Service probably had to work a lot of unpaid overtime to investigate all the threats against the president. But it wasn't until Trump, this past summer, where you actually had someone get a successful shot off, even though it wasn't a lethal shot. I mean, literally, everything I've seen video wise is if he did not turn his head the second he did, he's gone. Um, so because you've lived in that world, and I know it was an ex-president who was then running to be president, so I know the details, the presidential detail is not as robust, but how the hell does someone get on a roof that close with a weapon? I mean, where's that failure? And still it kind of went away. Like I was in Washington the day that the Secret Service director was getting grilled. I was actually touring the Capitol that day, so there were
Hmm.
some things I wasn't able to do in the Capitol. I had a private tour, and because of what was going on there. And then of course she was gone there within that week or whatever, stepped down. But I don't know, like how does this happen, and how does it never happen
So
again? I know it's
yeah,
never is a
so
bad word, but
right, right. So the security plan for the site was built by the advance team. It
Mhm.
was approved by the lead agent for President Trump, right? It's approved there. I don't believe it went, I don't know how much higher it went in the
Yeah,
Secret Service. Now they're talking about the director having to sign off, which is ridiculous. The director
right.
has whatever. But anyway, so it's signed off, and that lead agent knows what he's bringing Trump into.
Hmm.
If that plan is executed properly, that doesn't happen, right? There
Hmm.
was a breakdown, and that's why, like I said, like when I was part of the team securing the hotel during election night, I was going back and doing a check. I'm walking around. So
Yeah.
you remember seeing in the video afterwards that there was a bunch of suits and some police officers trying to get through a fence just to even get over there.
Hmm.
Right behind that building was the check-in place for local law enforcement to check in.
Hmm.
I mean, they're within hundreds of feet, right?
Yeah.
Closer than the shooter is to the president.
Right.
And so it's covered because there's that picture of the one sniper that looks up over his rifle because his rifle is looking out at 800
Hmm.
or more or 600, whatever. He's looking at the long perimeter where somebody with a big gun can take some shots and maybe get
Right.
lucky.
Yeah.
So he's got to look over it because he can't dial it down that far to look close in.
Hmm.
So the later on we find out the ladder is not contained, it's not closed off, it's not locked, it's not barricaded. So
Hmm.
he's able to freely climb to the top of that.
Yeah.
There's nobody in a marshal, sheriff, police uniform walking the top of that close in building,
Hmm.
right? So I believe, and I haven't seen it because it's classified, but
Hmm.
I believe the plan was probably solid, but its execution had some flaws in it. And
Yeah.
right. And when you've got when the majority of the people helping you are these uh, unnamed, I don't know what the heck they do, Homeland Security
Right.
officers
Yeah.
who have not been through protective training. And you could tell they're not been very well trained for stress
Hmm.
by their actions.
Yeah. The videos were
Um,
very telling on those. Yeah.
Right, right. And that takes a lot of training to get stress inoculated to stand
Right.
there and go, "Ah, I'm being shot at, and then do something appropriate.
Yes.
So there's a few breakdowns, like you say. It is not the A team. He probably would have had a better team had they said because there was a lull, there was a gap between when he won, when everybody knew he was the candidate
Right.
and when they gave him candidate level protection.
And does that not happen until the convention?
normally
Okay.
until you're nominated.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
everybody, yeah, I mean, it's, and politics, yeah, maybe whatever.
Right.
But that there, so it wasn't the A team. I mean, the agents that surrounded him, and shout out to the smaller agent, the female agent that came over there, and everybody's griping, she's too small, she's this. She put her life on the
You
line,
did. Yeah.
right? But then they're on the radio, they're trying to keep him down. He's amped up. You're not
Yeah.
keeping him down.
Right.
And the lead agent's on the radio trying to get the limo and or the backup in so they can stuff him into an armored vehicle.
Hmm.
And right, there were other vehicles around and it looked like they had to maneuver. So probably a good plan, not well
Not
executed,
well executed. Yeah.
certainly, right?
Yeah.
Got very lucky. Um, and yeah,
Hmm.
it's unfortunately some other people died as
Yeah.
a
One,
result of
well,
that.
one death and two serious injuries, I believe. I think
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was.
that
So
gentleman who was a firefighter passed
yeah.
away. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, and
I
it's one
mean,
of those
it's
things where I watched it pretty heavily just because again I have no association with it. I've read a ton of books. I have obviously friends that I've served, and I have just as a lot of people do. So I'm not setting myself apart, but I have just immense amount of respect for an organization and for a group of people that willingly will go into something with at least the expectation that it's possible I could have to stand in front of a bullet for somebody. So can't express how much I respect that. But then you see a cataclysmic failure like that, and you're like, this isn't just some ragtag group of people, and this isn't an organization that doesn't have billions of dollars thrown at it. It's like, and I think my faith in the system is that they've probably beat themselves up pretty seriously about this, and hopefully they've fixed any of those holes that they found in the course of the process. At least
the
that's what
sec
I hope.
yeah, the Secret Service has a pretty good track record of fixing what it doesn't want to hide.
Yeah.
Um, um, and I'm not afraid to say it, and it's just my opinion. But the Presidential Protective Detail is wears an A on their forehead for arrogance. And several times when like the clothes, when the White House police officers, with the white shirts around the White House have brought
Mhm.
up issues and things like that. They've been stuffed down.
Mm.
There's been books written about it and
Yeah.
reports and other things like that. I think what the Service needs to do is drop all the investigative stuff. There's so many other agencies like
Hmm.
Chris Albanese now works for another agency that does financial investigations,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
Chris is an expert at that kind of stuff. Get back the Secret Service away from the stuff that there's 20 other agencies and
Hmm.
Treasury and other people that can do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Back them away from that workload so that they can focus on protection.
Hmm.
And I think we'd see a better outcome,
Yeah.
right? Instead of being spread. And so anyway, so
Well,
there's
like you mentioned
always,
with
yeah.
when you were there, which obviously was, decades ago, that you maxed out on being able to earn more. I know stuff like that still occurs just from talking to people that, they just work these men and women sometimes to literal death, where they're so stressed out. And years ago when I was talking to folks just about life in general, and they basically said Secret Service divorce rate hovers close to 100%. The only way you probably don't get divorced is if you marry another Secret Service agent because you're both you know the world, you're living that same lifestyle, and you probably don't even have time to get divorced because you hardly see each other basically. And it was
Well,
said in jest, but it was
yeah,
just talking the person I was talking with, we were just talking about the stress levels of, you know, most people's jobs don't have to deal with that level of, zero fail mentality that they have to have and everything
right,
else that comes with it.
right. While I was there, there was a study done from a gentleman, and it was concerning that there, if you go and look at the wall, so to speak, the Secret Service wall,
Mhm.
there are people who died clearly from whether it's bad eating habits, but the stress.
Yeah.
They weren't shot in the line of duty or other things. They just unfortunately dropped while they were on not on duty, but in the Secret Service.
Yeah.
So the stress, yeah, the stress is really high.
Yeah.
Um, the mentality of, there isn't anything we won't do to protect the president.
Right.
Well, that's great, but if the breakdown's always going to be people at that
Hmm.
point, right?
Correct.
Somewhere along the way. So anyway, I think new leadership, some focus of mission would
Hmm.
help them go a long way because there's still lots of people to protect, right? We've still got foreign dignitaries, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And State Department really is focused on overseas, with the exception of the Secretary of State. So, there's it, they are actually the ones, if .gov is hacked, they're the ones that investigate. There's a group called CISA,
Hmm.
which is um, cybersecurity experts, but you've got a sworn police a law officer doing the investigation, right? From a
Hmm.
evidentiary standpoint, things like that. And so,
Yeah.
get rid of that kind of stuff. There was a time, when, people were making lots of funny money.
Hmm.
I've I've used I've been involved in using funny money, giving funny money to the DEA so they could buy drugs and stuff like that. And so
You haven't
there's
sent me any of this funny money. What in the world? Come on. What kind of friend are you?
if I send you money, it's going to have Alfred P. Newman.
It could have
Yeah,
El Chapo because we need to talk about El Chapo here in a couple minutes here. So
yeah. Well, yeah, and I'll just send you to Fort Meade. Go up there. They produce some really nice Cuban notes and some other things that we can't talk about. That anyway, but yeah, give that up and focus on protection. I think it help the organization really with its um, right with its ability to attract people. Number
yeah,
one,
right.
right? Because um, I had a former agent, tell me that in his day, his office was 60 people,
Hmm.
and like now it's 15
Hmm.
because
Wow.
the Secret Service, if you go on certain websites and stuff, has a really poor reputation as a place to work
Hmm.
because of that. You get worked to death kind of thing. And
Yeah.
oh, by the way, you just got off the airplane, go grab a bag because we need you to go again.
Yep.
Turn around in minutes kind of idea. So yeah, hopefully they can get some relief there and the kind of funding they need to get the mission done. I mean, they were doing, the term cables is used in intelligence and State
Hmm.
Department. It's just an old term. Now it's electronic, it's an email, but it's a cable
Yeah.
because got certification around it. But they were still doing that kind of thing, paper cables and things in the Secret Service into the 2000s. So
Hmm.
they have not moved forward as in the digital world.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, speaking of moving forward, let's move forward and talk about Steve Stratton's books. So let's talk about Shadow Tier series. Um, so Caribbean Harvest, and the other thing too, in Shadow Tier, obviously the cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, is in the crosshairs. Shadow Sanction, you've got the Taliban going on here with opium, and now Caribbean Harvest, you got El Chapo. Are you trying to get a target on yourself? Is question number one. What are you doing?
Well, luckily, El Chapo is just down the street from me in Florence, Colorado at the ADX Supermax,
So
right?
he's digging out of that any day. Any day he'll dig out of that thing. Come on.
Course, I'm ignoring the fact he's got three sons and everybody else who wants to take over the organization. But yeah, if they read my books, I'd like some feedback. How am I
Do
getting
I
it right?
got do I got it right? Did I spell your name right?
Did I design the tunnel correctly? Um, yeah. So once again, this comes out of that event back many years ago in 1993. But
Yeah.
I'd never thought about writing, a counter drug series.
Hmm.
Um, uh, some of the more famous books about the cartels have actually been about the families and more of a Godfather type story, right?
Right.
Um,
Netflix has actually done a pretty good job with that for their series,
oh yeah, a couple of
honestly.
them, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So mine is for the listeners who don't know, my good guy Lance Beowulf's Crow Indian. He and his parents, his mother and his stepfather, are coming back from Puerto Vallarta up Route 15 to Tucson when they stop for lunch and the cartel wants some product back and they get involved in a gunfight. His parents died. And so the first book, I've always joked with you, it was my favorite easy book to write because it's about revenge. What's he thinking about? Revenge. What's he want to do? He wants to kill more cartel guys.
Absolutely.
And actually a woman in that book. And then so yeah, the second book I expanded that out in because we'd seen this. It's funny, as we started our war in Afghanistan,
Mhm.
people like General Mattis, when he was a one star, is coming in the country and saying, my Marines here are to take or fight terrorists. We're not here to fight, right? They're just marching through the poppies because that's not their job.
Right.
And then it's not till years later before a good friend of ours, Jeff Higgins, in real life, shows up as the DEA guy in Kabul and starts bringing the drug war fight to the Afghans because at one point they were making $400 million a year
Yeah.
out of their heroin that's going up into Europe.
Oh yeah.
So in that second book, I connect the Taliban and opium to Marseille, France, because you remember the story with Popeye Doyle and the French
Hmm.
Connection.
Yep.
Well, I do research and find out it's all real. So I regenerate the connection. And anyway, we end up in New York City, and that was that was complex to write, but it was a lot of fun to write.
Hmm.
And I promised myself in the next book I would not, because I even did Rainbow Six stuff and created a unit in Europe, right?
Hmm.
I promised myself I would make it easy on myself. One island, three people, that kind of thing. And there's a couple more people than three, but I'm not all over the map in this most recent book.
And then in the meantime, you also did a novella, which came out last year.
Right. A
So,
lot of people said, and my writing early on was definitely military focused. There was plans, procedures,
sure.
technology, and people are like, I want to learn more about Lance. We know he's mad. We know he wants revenge, but what's
Right.
Lance about? So I decided to write that novella,
Hmm.
A Warrior's Path, and it starts with Lance when he's 14 and his father dies from an overdose.
Yeah.
So right away he's, you know, got an axe to grind with cartel.
Cartels. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and he maneuvers his military life into South America, Seven Special Forces, working out of the embassy in Bogota, and starts doing things with DEA. And
Hmm.
back in the day, in the 80s, DEA had a program called Snowcap.
Okay.
Um, I lost a good friend on Snowcap on an airplane crash. Um, but that program, there was DEA agents who had gone through more military style training that would go out with Colombian military and prosecute targets and
Hmm.
really get after the bad guys. So, um,
Do you feel like because of the life that you lived with your time in special forces and stuff, do you think that writing about it is in a way like therapeutic for you?
certainly was about Jay
Okay.
and that kind of thing. Didn't write it in specifically, but
Yeah,
pay a little homage to a friend who's no longer around.
sure.
Yeah, uh, yeah, that was made all the harder because my Special Forces A team, my ODA, my weapons sergeant, Jay was Brad's brother. So
Okay.
uh, the whole team took it pretty hard when Jay passed away.
Hmm.
But yeah, so there's definitely been the first book was very therapeutic.
Hmm.
Uh, there are still scenes where I'll get teary-eyed reading,
Yeah.
you know, about stuff, and I, that's I like that part of writing. I like remembering friends.
Hmm.
And then just the opposite, throwing in something goofy because, right, of the dark humor we tend to have in the military, throwing in something, that's, even as crazy as just before I came on, I was writing a scene where uh, my my good guy is watching the bad guys, the Russians, take action exactly how he planned it. And
Mhm.
all of a sudden he sees himself as Patton on a hillside yelling at Rommel. So it's like, why not? Have fun writing.
Have fun. Well, we were talking offline about some stuff that I didn't want to put on the air about Camp David and some different stuff, just to pick your brain of how it really works. And I was writing a chapter yesterday that took place at Camp David, and totally like, again, I'm picking the brains of friends I know that have worked there, of stuff that general stuff that they could say,
Mhm.
researching stuff that you try to find, and then just make crap up. And as I was writing this chapter, I thought, my president, I want him to have the cabinet meet once a month up at Camp David, very informal. You're not in the White House, you're not in that thing. Just they can unwind. They can go. Was the Aspen Lodge is the president's, right?
Yeah.
So the Laurel Lodge is the bigger one where they have the meetings and stuff, I believe. So, have them in the Laurel Lodge, just kind of chilling a little bit more. And so as I'm writing this, I'm like, wouldn't it be funny if the president, when he first starts doing this, lets alcohol be involved? And what if the Secretary of Energy, going through a divorce, gets a little tipsy one time and spouts his mouth off? Well, the president ends up saying no more alcohol for about 6 months. And then he starts letting the hair down a little bit and says, okay, we can do alcohol again. But um, the Secretary of Energy, whose name is Jesus Martinez, we got to watch him. So there's a one drink limit, and every time they go to get that first drink, they call it Jesus juice because they're just giving a little zing to the fact that he got hammered in front of the president, and made a fool of himself. Again, something that probably wouldn't happen in real life, but just something fun and something to put in the narrative that you should like these. And I try to make it where these are human beings. We almost put our elected officials and especially people at the presidency and all that on this pole way up in the air. And you yourself know that these are regular people who are in an extraordinary job and normally brilliant individuals, but they sometimes have to let their hair down and just be normal people. And circling back to what we talked about to start with, this journey goes by really quick. So you better enjoy those different pieces in the journey as best you can. You can't always enjoy it. Life happens. But man, try to find that nugget of goodness in each thing. When you're getting to make a hottie toddy for the president, you know, give a little wink, give a little smile, because that might be a cool thing to be able to do.
One of my most enjoyable parts was not making that hot toddy. It was having Jonas Saul edit one of my books because I can speak English. I don't know how to write it. I'm telling you, I use Pro Writing Aid, I use AutoCrit, and still Jonas is like, wow, okay, yeah, let me fix this. So, but that's once again, that's just part of it.
Yeah.
If you're voracious, if you're a really hardcore editor and you're good at it, good on you.
Yep.
Write your best book, edit the heck out of it before you send in your query letters and do all that. If you
Hmm.
want to, the traditional publishing kind of thing, good on you if you're going to head that way. Personally, I'm lucky enough now that I got a second traditional publishing
Hmm.
deal, one book to start with.
Hmm.
We'll see where that goes. But I'm enjoying this independence and also just being a nerd, sort of like you said, figuring out the business and the
Yeah,
technical side of it and things like that. And so it's keeping me out of mischief and away from the sheriff and stuff like that.
that's a good thing. That's definitely a
A
good thing.
good thing.
So to wrap it up, where does Steve go after Caribbean Harvest? What will be next on what's on your creative plate besides the book coming out on January 14th?
Yeah, so next fall we should have Codename Snowman come out,
Hmm.
and that's a series with Janet Winter, who's a agency psychologist who's deaf, and that's an interesting story. I've already got book two written, at least in first draft mode, set
Hmm.
me one and a half draft mode. Um, but then in the meantime, because I was at BoucherCon in Nashville and Mark Cameron was jesting with me about writing about the Secret Service, I've written four short stories and I'm still undetermined about do I use them as anchors, which is
Hmm.
a term like a free giveaway to give to people to
Yeah.
get them interested in your books, or do I write four more and put them together in my own anthology, four short
Sure.
stories. Uh, Not so short, about 6,000 words, but in that range, something like that.
Hmm.
So that's interesting and going on, and I've got another project where I'm writing a World War III story. Um, so I'm staying busy, and where Steve goes is a good question. Lance in the next book with Lance in it will be around fentanyl and China and
Hmm.
the cartels and things like that. I love that the Sinaloa brothers put up a big sign saying, "Hey, we're stopping fentanyl. We don't believe in it. It's only
Sure.
worth $1.5 million or $1 billion to us. We're going to
Yeah.
give it up." So plenty to write about. All you got to do is look in the news, right, Eric?
Uh, that's uh, that's where I get a few ideas. I actually did when I was writing last night, I did actually use the term UAP. I was in this one spot and I was just like, where can I throw a little like, "Oh, I wonder what's going on?" I'm like, UAPs are kind of, we're talking about an alien invasion in 2025, I'm hearing. So maybe UAPs is a good idea to kind of dive into that a little bit with the next Body Man book. So yeah.
Nice. Nice. And it can never tell.
Who knows? At this stage, with the weirdness we've been through in the last 4 years or so, it's like I don't I don't know what 2025 is going to throw at us. I do know I'm going to try to do some traveling. I do know got some big concerts lined up with my son, so that's pretty exciting. And I was hoping to have two books out again next year, but I think lesson learned this year two might be a little too ambitious. I might have to do like a 9 month gap, not 6 months. Maybe I can turn one out every 9 months for the next couple of years. Maybe we'll see. But
Nice.
just
Looking
enjoy the
forward to that,
journey.
brother. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Well, hey, I always end these with the same question. So I think you'd agree with me that life's like a book. You got a first page, you got a last page. We don't know how many pages exist between those, which is, I think, a blessing. But since Steve Stratton, internationally selling author, Steve Stratton is a writer, what you get to write your last page. What would you like that to say? Throw you a softball here, Steve. I mean, it's only
Yeah.
this age of your life. What in the world?
This age of my life. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me think. Let's see.
Stroke that gorgeous beard as you're thinking. That absolutely.
I just got it trimmed up. My wife said I was looking a little homeless, so I had to get it trimmed. Um,
Looking like David Letterman or something.
yeah, it was pretty bushy. It was pretty bush. But yeah, I think I'd like that last chapter to say, here was somebody who cared, and he embraced embraced the suck for to better himself and to help others, and yeah, that I had empathy for the people I meet, the people I engage with, and just want to leave the world a better place.
Amen. Well, as someone who's gotten to be fortunate to be your friend the last couple of years, I'm thankful for your service to our country in more than one way, not just the military, but also through your time working in Washington and, just being able to basically serve something bigger than yourself. And I think that's always a good admonition to all of us. It doesn't have to be in anything big like that. You don't have to join the military. You don't have to do that. Get involved in your community. Get involved with, family, friends that need something, even if it's not financially. Maybe they just, and it's an admonition to myself. When I say these things, trust me, I'm not on some high horse preaching. I'm preaching to myself most of the time I say this is maybe you need to pick up the phone and call a friend or a family member you haven't talked to in a while. So, I'd say this frequently, especially my kids, life's a gift. It's short. You don't know how long you got. Enjoy the ride, first of all, but be grateful for the ride as well. So,
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for having
no,
me,
thank
bud.
you. Caribbean Harvest is out September 14th. Where can people go to get a copy of it?
Well, let's put it out in January 14th of 25,
What did I say?
September. So,
September. Oh,
yeah,
goodness.
let's do January.
Let's do
Let's
January
not make them
14th.
wait any more than they have to.
What's
But
coming
yeah,
out in September? I don't know. I don't know why
I don't
September.
know. I don't know. It's probably
I
another
didn't have
Taylor or
dinner.
Thor book. But yeah, so it's coming out January 25th, and of course you can get it on Amazon right now. You can pre-order the ebook. There'll be paperbacks, and I'll probably do the Amazon hardcover for people who would like a signed copy. $5 of every book I sell goes to the Special Operations Warrior Fund.
Hmm.
And I always contribute there. And it's a great organization where just, I don't know, less than 8% is used for
For admin and stuff.
running the association or the organization.
Right.
It all goes to the needy. So I'm blessed that the book's coming out, and you can go to Amazon. Ingram Spark will have it at Barnes and Noble and other places where you'll be able to get it in their catalog. And hopefully, I'll be able to sneak some on some shelves around the airports around America as I do some of my travel in
Love it.
25.
Show that cover again.
All right, brother, here you go.
Okay. January 14th, 2025. Caribbean Harvest, Steve Stratton. Steve, thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot, brother. Take care.